Good evening, everybody. It is April 9th, 2025, and I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Murrieta Planning Commission to order. It is 6 p.m. A couple meetings ago, the selection of the vice chair was continued. It was actually on the February 21st, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. So we need to select a vice chair. We continued that at that time, so I would like to open it to my colleagues here if there's any nominations for vice chair.
I don't have anyone in particular, but Mike or Joe, would you guys like to vice chair? Joe? Okay. All right. Well, then I'll nominate Commissioner Wojciech.
I'll second that nomination.
All right. Do we need to do a...
Well, I would move that we close nominations and by acclamation vote Joe in.
So could I get a roll call vote?
Do I need a second?
Chair
No, I
Ruman?
made the second.
Oh.
Chair Ruman?
Aye.
Commissioner Wojciech?
Aye.
Commissioner LaPaglia?
Aye.
Commissioner Beamish?
Aye.
Commissioner DeSena?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, 5-0.
Congratulations. We now have vice chair. Appreciate it. With that, we'll go ahead with the roll call vote. Attendance vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Ruman?
Here.
Vice Chair Wojciech?
Here.
Commissioner LaPaglia?
Here.
Commissioner DeSena?
Here.
Commissioner Beamish?
Present.
Let the record reflect all members are present.
With that, I'd like everyone to please stand, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. New Vice Chair Wojciech, would you mind leading us?
Yes. You please put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That moves us on to the approval of the agenda. We do have a change in the order. We're going to move the presentation by staff to the end because it looks like we have an audience here for one of the items on the agenda. So we're going to move you to the front so you don't have to stay all the way to the end of the meeting. So we'll go ahead and make that change. Are there any other proposed changes to the agenda?
Seeing none?
With that, I'd like to call for a motion and a second, please, to approve the agenda.
I would move we approve the agenda as amended.
I will second.
Looks like we have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Ruman?
Aye.
Vice Chair Wojciech?
Aye.
Commissioner LaPaglia?
Aye.
Commissioner DeSena?
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Beamish?
Yes.
Let the record reflect, motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. This moves us on to public comments. At this time, we will take public comments. Any person may address the Planning Commission on any subject pertaining to city business, which does not relate to any item listed on the agenda or the consent calendar. Normally, no action may be considered or taken by the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda, and speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Madam Secretary, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Seeing none?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We're now moving on to the approval of minutes. We will have the approval of minutes from the January 22nd, 2025 regular Planning Commission meeting as presented. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on the approval of the minutes?
Seeing none?
Before we call for a motion and a second to approve the minutes, I noticed a small typo on there. I believe it reflects the meeting from the November meeting of November 2025, and it should reflect to November of 2024.
That's correct, Chair. We'll make that correction on the year in the minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to call for a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. Yeah.
I'll move approval.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we do a roll call vote, please?
Chair Vrooman,
I'm going to abstain because I was not here at that meeting.
Vice Chair Wojcik,
Abstain, I was not here.
Commissioner LaPaglia,
Aye.
Commissioner Beamish,
Yes.
Commissioner DeSena.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2.
With two abstaining, not
With
opposed.
with Vrooman and Wojcik abstaining.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you for the clarification, Madam Secretary. Now we're moving on to the next item, which is the public hearing. Public hearing is revised conditional use permit, CUP 2024-00030, for a 4,680 square foot assembly building or youth center for the Calvary Chapel. Are there any members of the Planning Commission that wishes to abstain or recuse themselves from this item? Seeing none, we'll move on to staff presentation. Staff, do we have a staff report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Tonight we have Nicholas Thiessen, Assistant Planner, as well as Dennis Watts, Senior Planner in the well. Take it away, guys.
Thank you for the introduction, Carl. Good evening, Chair Vrooman, fellow commissioners. My name is Nicholas Thiessen, Assistant Planner in the Development Services Department, presenting this project for your review tonight. Joining me here is Dennis Watts, Senior Planner of the Development Services Department. And before you is a revised conditional use permit for a new assembly building referred to as the Youth Center. This slide provides an aerial view of the project site. The proposed project is located on a previously developed church facility, Calvary Chapel, Murrieta, which is located at 24225 Monroe Avenue, generally located at the southwesterly corner of Monroe Avenue and Troy's Lane. This exhibit identifies the subject site, which is zoned civic institutional, with a general plan designation of civic and institutional. To the north of the project is an existing housing development zoned single-family residential 1, and to the south and east are areas designated for open space, and to the west, the project site is bordered by the I-15 freeway. A little background on this project. On November 9th, 1994, the City of Murrieta Planning Commission voted to approve public use permit 94-047 to construct a 972-seat church complex with a 760 student private school. On August 14th, 2002, the City of Murrieta Planning Commission voted to approve revised permit 02-121, which would locate 7 relocatable schoolroom units with support services, landscaping, and amenities along the westerly edge of the existing playground. There are 2 existing access points from Monroe Avenue to the church and private school, with no changes being proposed through this project. Both the northerly and southerly access points on Monroe Avenue provide for full unrestricted access with left and right-hand turns into and out of the project site. The project proposal before you today is requesting approval of a revised conditional use permit pursuant to Chapter 16.52 of the Murrieta Municipal Code. The revised permit would authorize a new 4,680 square foot, single-story, 16-foot, 6-inch tall metal assembly building, referred to as the Youth Center. This would be for the purposes of classroom and office space to serve the existing middle school and high school age members of the Calvary Chapel on a previously developed church facility, hereinafter referred to as the project. The project's proposed on an 8.63 acre gross site with a 0.31 acre net area of disturbance, all located on a previously developed church facility. As mentioned previously, there's 2 existing access points from Monroe Avenue that lead to the internal drive aisles and main parking field. The project's required to provide 320 parking spaces. The site has 315 existing and includes 8 accessible spaces and will be conditioned to provide 2 new EV stations as part of the project. There's also a shared parking agreement with the Calvary Chapel Private School on the adjacent southerly parcel to make up for the 5 spaces not provided on site. The project will provide a significant amount of landscaping at a rate of 50% throughout the area of disturbance and will include 1 WQMP basin and underground storm drain, which will collect and manage on-site runoff as designed. It will also connect to all on-site utilities to include water, natural gas, electricity, sewer, and telecommunications. This image is a conceptual elevation showing the building facade and general landscaping of the proposed youth center. While the project design approach for this building is simple and utilizes a pre-manufactured metal farm building to meet the church's programming needs, the color palette was smartly chosen to consist of colors found throughout the church and school facilities. The trim and structural elements are used to tie the project within the existing campus, and extensive water-wise landscaping has also been proposed to further enhance the building's exterior and present a beautiful agrarian vernacular aesthetic. The proposed floor plan for the 4,680 square foot youth center will offer a dedicated flexible space for current middle school and high school students. Upon entering the facility, you'll see that the 2 main assembly rooms, which are approximately 1,450 square feet each, flank the central area of the building. In the center of the building is the remaining 1,780 square feet, which provides for the lobby, reception area, offices, and restrooms. The youth center will provide the youth who attend a place to have ministry events, worship nights, and Bible teaching for the church ministries. In addition, the church has a school ministry, Calvary Murrieta Christian Schools, that will also use the building for worship, Bible teaching, and youth events intermittently. The church and school will operate the youth center at different times as follows. The youth ministries will use it Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., and on Sundays, 7:30 to 1:30 p.m. The school youth population will utilize it during regular school hours, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. As proposed, the project will not increase the originally permitted maximum number of seats for attendance, which allowed a 960-seat church complex with a 760-student private school. The project has been evaluated and determined to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, under CEQA Guidelines Section 15303, Class 3, new construction or conversion of small structures based on the following findings. The project's an assembly structure and is less than 10,000 square feet. It does not involve the use of significant amounts of hazardous substances. All necessary public services and facilities are available, and the surrounding area is not environmentally sensitive. In closing, it's staff recommendation tonight for you, the Planning Commission, to consider and approve the notice of exemption for new construction or conversion of small structures and adopt the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Murrieta approving revised conditional use permit 2024-00030. Thank you for your time tonight, and this concludes my presentation for this project. I'm available, as well as the applicant and their team, to address any questions the Commission may have on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Thiessen, for your presentation. At this time, we're going to open up questions of our Commission members to staff. I'll go ahead and start to my far right, Mr. LaPaglia. Do you have any questions of staff?
No questions. Everything's been covered as far as any type of environmental study that would be done. Obviously, it's a pre-existing development that's been there for a long time. They're just kind of, adding a building to what's already there. I think you mentioned that the stormwater discharge or something has been accounted for, and there's no issues with that?
No. So the project was required to have a project WQMP It was reviewed by the city engineering department, and the project, based on the develop, is required to provide a basin on site within the area of disturbance, and from there, it'll connect to an existing storm drain and exit out to
Sure.
the remaining baseball field, which is used for collection.
Okay, okay. The basin that's being built, I saw the slide briefly, but is it like a usable area, like grass, or is it like an actual detention basin that's going to be fenced off?
That is a great question. That is included within the landscape area. I do not believe that it was
That's okay.
fenced off.
It doesn't, yeah, I like and prefer them when they're, accessible and usable, space for, kids to play or whatever, so.
Right.
Hopefully it's that way, but no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, Mr. DeCina, do you have any questions?
I do have a question. So traffic in that area, specifically on Monroe, during school time pickup, tends to be very congested and backed up on that Monroe for people going into that area. Are people going to be able to access this building during school hours or right after school, in between that gap of 3 to 6? That are outside of the school times?
Outside of the school times, yes, because both uses, the church facility as well as the school facility, will use them during the times that were identified. They're meant to allow for space in between and operate independently from each other. And again, this project isn't adding any additional students or members to the church, so the existing situation will remain the same.
So nobody from outside will be there during the school hours? So like people going to the ministry or going to, in general, they won't be able to use that space during like school time hours?
It's based off of the applicant's own operation plan that they've provided us, that it wouldn't operate that way.
Okay, perfect. That would be my only concern, is like traffic's already backed up on Monroe and a lot of the other kind of schools in the area.
Right.
So as to add additional traffic in that area, causing more congestion.
Understood.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Wojcik?
Yeah, just real quick. Does this project, are there any design standards that the city has for projects such as this?
So for this project, it's in the civic institution zoning district, which is limited in its development standards. It does, because of that zoning, allow for a multitude of flexibility within it, just because of the nature of types of uses that would go there. But as far as the standards that it does have, setbacks, building height, all of those requirements, this project was found to comply with, yes.
Okay. And is the applicant going to give a brief presentation too, or? 'cause I have a
They're
couple-
here, and I believe they intend
Okay.
to speak, yes.
Mr. Beamish?
No questions. My colleagues asked my questions. Thank you very much. And staff report was very complete. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I have no questions, and I echo Mr. Beamish's comments. You did a great job and answered all my questions. At this point in time, I'd like to invite up, if they want to do a presentation, the applicant, please. You don't have to, but if you'd like to. And typically, we allow 15 minutes for please come to the podium there. And I believe the microphone should be on, and we'll turn it over to you. And if you could just please state your name for the record for us, please, before you get started.
Yes, my name is Fausto Reyes. I'm with Landark. We're the landscape architects and planners on the project, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'll just give you a couple of additional items to add on to the description of the project. And some of the, I think, things that were mentioned was pretty clear, but I want to add some other, I think, positive benefits to location and the structure itself. And I also have Kevin here from the church. They'll be able to add some detail to the usage and function of the building. Just a couple of other positive things about the building is it's really tucked back in away from the street, about 200 feet roughly. You can see that there's a ball field, existing ball field between the building and the street. So it's kind of tucked in between all the existing buildings, roughly plus or minus 200 feet. The area that's there now is just an open space with a couple of DG and gravel areas and some shade trees. We are losing about 3 kind of larger trees, but we're replacing that with about 39 new trees and 4 dactylifera palms. The other positive thing is we're not touching the ball field at all. Just one thing on the basin. The basin's actually, and we do have our civil engineer here as well, if you need more detail, but it's tucked in between the building and the ball field, so it's not a deep basin, very shallow, and anything that would overflow from that either would go into a pipe to go out to the street or into the ball field area. So it's not a usable space per se, but it's definitely not what you're thinking, like a large basin 3 feet deep or anything like that. So it's pretty mild. We are adding, like was mentioned before, a couple of EV stations that aren't there now currently. I think some of the positive things as far as the usage, I do see people being, and that was a question too, dropped off and picked up in front of the building. Again, being away from the street, that would allow for a safe zone or a drop-off area for pickup and drop-off. The other thing is it's kind of creating a buffer between the parking lot, existing parking lot, and the current buildings that are there now. And so any play areas that are going to occur will be behind the new building in a kind of a secured fenced off area. So there wouldn't be anybody to trek outside of the boundaries, if you will, of the play areas. And there is some equipment that we are adding for HVAC and that type of stuff. That'll be on the side of the building. That'll be all screened and surrounded by landscape. So there is quite a bit of landscape being added. I'm going to have Kevin kind of step up and talk about just the general function and use of the building. And like I said, we have our civil here also.
Thanks, Fausto. My name's Kevin Terry. I've been at Calvary Murrieta for 20 years plus. And I also have the honor of being able to build this project for the church. And I have grandchildren that are actually in the programs right now that this building's going to support. And they've been working out of small space or spaces that are crowded for many years. And so the concept to build this a while back, it's taken the process of going through all of this, but it's turning out to be a tremendous addition to the church to give space for those kids to do what they do when they get together. So I don't have a lot of, I can answer questions about the building as I've been involved in the design for the last year or so, but I really don't have much more to add to that unless you have questions.
Thank you, sir. I will open it up to questions from my colleagues here for you. So I'll start at this end, Mr. Beamish.
Oh, thanks. I went up there and took a look at the site. I find it visually better than looking at a map. But isn't there a playground up there? And is that going to be moved, or did I not see?
There is a preschool playground that is no longer in use. There used to be a preschool right there, but that building was converted into a fellowship hall. So the preschool playground is coming out. And it's been, I think it's a new one down at the school grounds. And that's where they moved the preschool. The other playground that's there is going to stay, and it'll be in a fenced area so that the church will have access to it from that side. It won't be accessible from the school side unless you go into the church. There's going to be a gate between the church and school. So if this, it's not intended to be used by the junior high school students who are in those modulars right nearby where that playground is.
And the school is the other side, elementary, that's up through 6th grade, right?
They're down at the lower campus.
Right. And 7th and 8th is up above. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wojcik.
I haven't been to the site, so pardon my ignorance. Does the school site currently have a multi-purpose room for the students to use, or is this going to be used in place of that?
No, they use the sanctuary for chapel, so they come up, walk up the hill to the chapel to do chapel. This added building will give them an option, but I don't know that there's any specific program in place for how they would use it for, because of the different age groups and the size of the rooms. They're not going to be able to house all the, normally when they have chapel, there's 1st through 6th grade, and they're in their sanctuary. So I think there's too many students to use the youth center for chapel.
Okay. And then does the school offer, is there an indoor cafeteria, or are the kids eating outdoors? Or?
Gosh, I don't know the answer to that. Pastor Larry's here, he might know.
Anybody can holler on that one.
You want me to answer?
Sure.
If you could please come up and state your name.
Hi, guys. Larry Hansen. I'm one of the pastors at the church, and I'm also on the school board and the church board there. So we do have a cafeteria at the school, but the students all eat outdoors in a covered area.
Okay. Would this also be able to be used like on rainy days?
It would be a flex space that they could
Yeah.
use, on a rainy
Okay.
day. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. DeSena.
No questions.
I'll stay with you, Kevin, until they're
Please
done
do,
with, but
yeah.
I don't want to leave you alone.
I have
Yeah.
no questions either.
Yep, Mr.
Thank you.
LaPaglia.
Thank you. No questions. Thanks.
Okay.
No questions?
No questions.
No, I have no questions. As a comment, obviously you got a growing capacity, more teenagers, and you need more space, and
Yeah.
it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, we're excited to, and we keep seeing more apartments and more houses and stuff being built, so hopefully we can provide a safe place for those kids to come and hang out with us and have some fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will move on to our public testimony time. It is 6:27 p.m. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments, starting with proponents, then opponents, and then those are neutral?
Yes, we have one proponent. That would be Aliana Singh.
Please come on up.
Members and good people of Murrieta. My name is Aliana Singh, and I am a student at Calvary Murrieta Christian School, as well as an attendee at Calvary Murrieta Church. I am honored to be here today to speak on behalf of both my school and church community about a project that is very important to us. The building we are hoping to create is a youth center, which will serve both the junior high students at our school and the youth members of our church. This space would allow us to have a safe and welcoming environment to grow, learn, and bond, as well as growing a stronger foundation with a religion that we are very passionate about. This will provide valuable opportunities for both personal growth and community involvement. Having a dedicated space would make a huge difference for both the students and the youth at our church. Because of Calvary, I have been able to make so many great friendships and memories and just meet some of the best people, staff, and/or students. Some of my favorite memories are just sitting with my friends at church and getting to talk about personal life problems and experiences, or sitting in my Bible teacher's room and getting to have the best religious conversations, and asking and answering questions my peers and I come up with. This new youth center will help further these amazing conversations and relationships. Thank you for considering this project and for taking time to listen to our ideas. I truly believe that this building will have a positive impact on both our school and church communities, offering a safe, supportive space for learning, growth, and connection. I appreciate your time and consideration and hope you will support us in making this dream a reality. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Any other speakers?
There are no other speakers.
And just out of protocol, if the applicant wanted to make any last comments based upon any testimony that we had, you don't have to. We can, if not, we'll go ahead and close the public testimony period. Applicant, or did you want to, or no? You don't have to. Okay, good. All right, then we will go ahead and close the public testimony period. It is 6:29. Okay, any comments from my colleagues or anything, or it's time for a motion for a vote, but you're welcome to make any comments.
I'd just like to compliment the young woman that just came up and spoke. You spoke so well, so beautifully, and thank you for coming up and giving us 3 minutes of your time. That was great. And I wish we had more public comment like this in this chamber.
I definitely want to agree. Great job, honestly, by speaking. I think that was wonderful. I think it was well put together. I do think this community is starting to overgrow, honestly, and having more space for our teenagers to go to is a real positive thing. So I really, really am excited for them to be there and safe, not on the streets, and, you know, having kids to go somewhere is a really good thing.
I serve on a council for a charter school, and we didn't have a multi-purpose room, and a few years ago we built that. And it was interesting because it just kind of brings a new energy to the campus and excitement. So I'm sure you're going to be undergoing that as well, which is great, and the kiddos will love it. And so wish you the best of luck with that.
Mr. Beams?
I think it is a great project for the church and the school, and thank you.
And I would echo all those comments. I think it's a value-added asset to your site and the community at large. And it takes a portion of your property that wasn't previously being used, and it turns it into something that can be used for our teens. So it's a great asset to have. So thank you for bringing this forward. Appreciate it. So with that, I'll go ahead and call for a motion and a second.
I can read the motion for the commission if that pleases the chair. So staff recommends the Planning Commission consider and approve the notice of exemption for new construction or conversion of small structures, Class 3 new construction or conversion of small structures pursuant to the California Code of Regulations, Title 14, Section 15303 of the Guidelines for Implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and adopt the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Murrieta approving a revised permit, CUP 2024-00030, for the construction and operation of a 4,680 square foot building to be used for assembly, not associated with church services, the youth center, on 0.31 acres of net disturbance area with associated on-site landscaping within a previously developed church facility, the Calvary Chapel, Murrieta, located at 24225 Monroe Avenue. Based on the findings and subject conditions of approval in Exhibit A and operation statement in Exhibit B.
Okay, looking for a motion and a second on everything that Mr. Steele just provided for us.
I'll second.
We need a motion, though.
Need a motion.
I'll move.
Okay. A motion by Mr. Wojciak, second by Mr. Beamish.
We're going to try to vote on the screens here when it pops up. So just bear with us here for a second and see if it pops up. There you go.
Okay.
It's not popping up on mine.
Yeah.
Do I need to sign in? Because it says sign in the lower right corner. Is that, just click on that?
This is the first time we've used the electronic voting system here. So normally we do voice votes, but we're trying something new, so please bear with us.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Get in there? There you go.
Yeah.
So it's green. Green means go.
All right.
Sweet. Awesome.
Motion passes. Looks like 5-0. All greens on the screen. Congratulations and thank you. So this concludes this item. We're going to move on to our next item, which is a presentation by staff. You're all welcome to stay if you'd like, but you don't have to.
It's a condition
Yeah.
of the CUP.
Just give us a couple of minutes here. We'll load up the presentation. So with us tonight for this presentation from staff is Deputy Director Jared Ramayan.
Hey, good evening. That was nice. I liked hearing you guys compliment a young voice in this room, because I always felt if you have the oldest in your community and the youngest in your community participating, you're doing something right. And so really, that's great. I always love to hear the youth come here and speak, and I think that's the strength that we need to encourage. So thank you, gentlemen. Well, as Carl said, I'm Deputy Director of Development Services, Jeremiah. Pleased to be here before you tonight. Chair Vrooman, congratulations, Joe, on your appointment, and congrats again to our newer commissioners. Really appreciate you guys volunteering your time for this city. Let's jump in. We're going to have an informational meeting tonight about the Auto Mall area. I just want to walk you through the safety issues that staff has identified. We've had some meetings. We had a workshop back in October, and we've met with some businesses. I'd like to walk you through some of the positive things that we've seen. I'd like to focus on some of the things that we're going to have to follow up on and the next steps that staff are going to take. And so bear with me. I want to walk you through a lot of slides and information. I can slow down. We can ask some questions during it, but let me try to get through most of it so that we can get this in here. But forgive me if it's a lot of info. Just want to make sure that we present it carefully here tonight. All right, so let's get oriented with the location of this area. So Auto Mall is in the southern point of our city, right? If you look at it, French Valley Parkway is to the south, we got Jefferson to the west, we have our interstate to the east, and then we have Nick Lane to the north. And so if you look at those little yellow dots, those are all the businesses that we've noticed for the workshop that we had in October and for tonight. You know, these are the primary uses that you would see in the area. I think a lot of them are, it's autocentric, right? So it's vehicles, trucks, motorcycles. It's also sales, new cars and used cars. But I just want to know there's a lot of actually vibrant activity in the area. And to show you, this is the number of businesses. It's not a complete list, but just to show you the variety and the names and the brands of the folks that are here. These are all employers. There's a lot of jobs in this area, good paying jobs. But we have a lot going on. And so I just wanted to give kudos to all the hardworking folks that run these businesses. As we talk about tonight, I'm not going to call out specific ones in a good or bad box, but I do want to just give credit that when I see this many names, that means that there's a lot of hardworking, good activity. And I wanted to say that tonight is about being pro-business. But how do you work with businesses when they aren't able to do everything per the code? And so that's what we're going to talk about. You know, let's start with repair and maintenance of motor vehicles. So, you know, if you want to get this type of business in our city, you come in for a business license and you have a shell of a building. You might have to do some TI work, you know, update it for fire code. But these are the types of folks that don't need a special permit from you all, but they would have to get ministerial permits like building permits and other inspections. So I just want to let you know that there isn't a review, but it's a minimal review based upon existing buildings that new tenants are moving into. You know, as we have an Auto Mall, most cities will have this type of caveat that we find in the development code. It does call it out. It says like we're going to have a large number of parked vehicles, we're going to have traffic, we're going to have a lot of chemicals and products in the area. So it does tell us that this can work, but it's going to take a lot of hard work to make it work. And so over time, you're going to see the ebb and flow of certain businesses be able to maintain their business. And sometimes it's a healthy reminder. But at the end of the day, I think we did forecast that these can have some problematic uses that result. And so city staff and business owners, we have a role with one another. But I just want to say that we called this out when we birthed our city 30 plus years ago. Now, some of the impacts from, so if you're working on a car, or if you're selling a used vehicle, and if you're going to be parking that on our public street, our asset, those are not the best vehicles that should be left for a while. And I think if you walk around the area, you're seeing a lot of spills. We're seeing oil, transmission fluid, brake fluid. You're seeing pieces of automobiles on the streets. And so that's our public asset. That's the city's asset. It's not for someone to spoil. And as I walk around there, you might think, well, you know, don't we have street cleaning? This is such a mess that if it gets further out of control and this stuff gets in our storm drains, we as a city are in trouble. So that's where I have a care about, is if you're gonna be polluting the streets, that's putting a risk on the city, and that's not something that you're supposed to be doing. So I'll walk you through the code and how, forgive me.
Hey, Jared, just real quick, as you show us these slides, these pictures, are these actual pictures from the site there, or are they just taken from Google or something?
No, I physically walk around this neighborhood. I take all these sites. So every picture is from me, no stock. Unless that fancy picture that you saw with the other ones. But no, I do take a long walk. I spend about an hour walking around myself, and it's good to observe what's really there. But I also ride my bike around, so I notice these things as a cyclist on how city streets are used. But these are all my observations in concert with code enforcement, police department, and fire department. But I would say that our development code tells us, let's be careful about congestion on public streets. Let's make sure that we have access and maneuverability for emergency vehicles. And so those are two themes that we want to think about in the next few slides that I'll walk you through. All right, the other big bucket in this neighborhood is the sales of new and used vehicles. This is where those guys need to get a permit. It's usually a minor conditional use permit, but it's a CUP. That's a very formal process. It does take an analysis by staff to work with the applicant to ultimately be able to make findings to support that project. And I want to let you know that indoor and outdoor and storage facilities, these are all permit types that require a formal analysis and review. And again, findings based on the development code. This one's really important. Every use, including a change or expansion of a use or structure, shall have appropriately maintained off-street parking and loading areas in compliance with the provisions of this code. When it says off-street, that doesn't mean on the street. So I just want to clarify that off-street means on your own business property. So that's the clarification. I think maybe people misread that section. And when we're making findings to support these, we have to say that it's suitable for the type and intensity of use, that it would not create impacts. And so when we supported a project and brought that to our director or brought it to you, we've made written findings to support that. And when an applicant is issued a use permit, they're supposed to remain in concert with those findings and those conditions of approval. And so I think that's where tonight we'll see, well, what do we do when someone's not in concert with their issued approval? I want to give a shout out to Enterprise. When we were looking at the property that Enterprise is on, it was a little intense. They had a lot of vehicles on the property, on the street. We had some meetings with the property owner and Enterprise. To their credit, they've come up with a plan. They have to get funding from their corporate, but they have been meeting with us routinely. They have cleaned up the site. And I just want to give a shout out that some businesses that we've met with, they actually on their own accord went and found solutions. And we may, if they get funding, we'll work with them to repurpose the front yard, allocate more space for them. And I just want to give a shout out that they on their own accord stepped up as well as the owner of the property. And so as we move forward, I want to just showcase some of the businesses that have found common ground on how to run and operate in our town. So I just want to give a shout out to them. Another one was Sandalwood Court, if you will. Autobot at Murrieta, they fix a lot of electric vehicles. You'll see a lot of Teslas and Rivians and things like that. Higher end cars, but they were on the street. And a lot of them were missing bumpers and doors and everything else, and that's just not what we want to see in the street. After a meeting with code enforcement and the gentleman, he got to work, and as I go around there today, I'm not seeing a lot of intensity on Sandalwood. And so that means that more customers can park on Sandalwood to complement those businesses. So again, another business that fixed it, and we'll keep going around and looking at that and see how they do it. But I just want to give another shout out. Let's pivot though. I'm not going to call out business names tonight. I don't think that would be fair because that's going to be the follow-up conversations that we'll have after tonight. But I'm going to show you a location that I think is endemic of how some issues can just flourish, if you will. This is a property with 3 buildings. If you look on the bottom of the page, that would be Auto Mall Parkway. Hobie Circle is to the left of your image. This has 3 buildings comprised of many, many suites, which are independent businesses. We have a mix of auto repair and auto sales, and some other businesses. We even have a church on the property. If you look at the areas within the red rectangles, those are fire lanes, and you're not supposed to park in a fire lane. Where I've shown the yellow arrows, that's where whenever we go out there, we see a consistency of vehicles parked in the fire lane. My fire marshal, my code enforcement, my PD, and myself constantly see a theme here where no matter how much attention we try to get in cooperation, they continue to block. And I think the issue is that we're not trying to get in the way here, but if an employee or a customer has a heart attack, or if there's a fire, God forbid, how the heck are we going to get the apparatus and the personnel back there? I just want to underscore that this is a site that we're going to have some very focused meetings on. And I would say that we may have to bring forward to you revocations requests. And I just want to put that on your radar that we're going to have meetings to underscore how they can find ways to fix their own problems. But this is a site where it's having a cumulative impact. And it's a consistent thing that we're observing. So although we've spent the last year plus trying to coordinate our efforts, I think in one sense, there's going to be some businesses that won't be able to fix their issues. And I think that we're going to focus our attention on those folks. But this is a complex site. One of the issues is that when you have a suite and you're dealing with, say, fixing cars or selling used cars, you're going to have to fix those things, right? And so what we're seeing is that they're using the fire lanes to do that type of work, to store or to fix. And that stuff should be done inside of your suite or within an area that you've secured for that reason. But you shall not park on our public streets. You shall not park in a fire lane. Those are the two themes that I'm focused on the most. So let's move into what's staff doing and what are we going to do next. I'm not going to make you read this thing. I'm going to move to a different slide, but let me walk you through our signage and striping that we're going to do next. There's some details I'd like to walk you through here. So this is a little bit more of a close-up. This is Automall Parkway and Hobie Circle. What you're seeing within the red squiggly lines are existing parking areas. In working with our traffic engineers, Ida and Brian, they have mapped out this section of the Automall Parkway. On one side of the street, we're going to use angled parking. And on the other side of the street, we're going to use marked spaces. The delta is that we probably will be able to get 25 more spaces at the end of the day. And it's really focused for the customers. I have run into customers who have shared with me that they can't find an easy space. And so there are customers out there that have that demand. So I just want to let you know that the width of the road that we have, we're going to be able to allocate a different striping pattern and do a better job. The reason for this too is that when we go out there today, the cars are parked so tightly, we cannot confirm if it has a license plate or not. And so if you have an angled space or a marked space that you have to work within the lines, we can see if that's an active car with active registration. So again, we can help with the parking allocation, but it's going to be for customer vehicles really and employees. But it's not going to be the storage of vehicles that are under repair or under sales. That's just not what the public street is for. Now, other cities have had and continue to have this problem. So when it comes to the lower left-hand corner, that is Google Earth, sorry. That's in another city. That street is on a Automall Parkway of their own. And they had to come in and actually stripe each space. So you can dimension the spaces so that you don't have it all crammed up. And then you can actually control the type of vehicles that are parked in the area. This area, they have a lot of problems with RVs and stuff like that. That's not our specific issue, but I do like the fact that they found ways to mark the space and also control the time, right? We're gonna have hours that you cannot park out there. That's gonna be one strategy. And the amount of space that you're allocated, which is really for common vehicles in this area. So with that, what we found is businesses can work together on shared parking agreements. That's something that we'd like to be a participatory on. That's two business owners coming together. And they should be able to look at their customer flow. I think, to be honest, what we found is that when you're a successful business, that's a good problem to have, but then you're trying to chase that customer. And, one business shared with us that it might take a week or a month for the insurance company to get back to you. What do you do with that vehicle? You have to store it. A lot of customers are not going to pay a storage fee. And so there's that dilemma for those small businesses. How are they going to get more area and work with that kind of consumer? So those special issues, I want to sit down and still work with some of those businesses and give them another way to find that common ground. So but again, businesses tell me to stay off of their back, and I want to help them get there. Again, these are successful businesses. I want to keep them in that vein. So staff, we're going to create angled parking through a striping plan. We're going to change the signage in that area. We think that those two things alone would be very helpful. Restricting the area is something that I think would even help because we're going to see more multifamily in Temecula, and I don't want to see some overflow from that area. That's another thing when you see cities growing together, sometimes you invite some of their overflow, and I think there's multiple reasons why I want to get ahead of it for the striping and signage. So for those businesses that after we have more meetings, if they continue to not work with us, we are going to bring those use permits back to you for a request for revocation if we've exhausted everything else. That may include business license revocations. And then we will involve the police department to enforce the streets. I would say, though, that all businesses and all applicants have a process before them. So when I just say that we'll come and revoke, I don't think it's going to be that quick. I think there's going to be a larger legal process that will probably come before us. So I'd rather spend more time in the positive direction. That's why I've spent the last year listening to businesses, trying to come up with ways for them to organize themselves. But I'll have to be honest, for those businesses that won't work with us, we're going to have to elevate that. And so I just want to share with you tonight that this is our informational meeting. We do have folks in the audience that I'm sure would want to share their thoughts with you. And I am here to answer any questions from your dais. So thank you very much for your time. Hopefully that was clear. But I am here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions of staff. I'll start again at the end, Mr. LaPaglia.
Thank you, Jarrett. Well, I wrote down a lot during your presentation, and I've got a lot of questions. Not really even sure where to start, but I do appreciate wanting to emphasize on the positiveness and, the partnership of businesses complying, and that goes both ways with the city being, I don't want to say lenient, but I guess accepting. I don't think this is a one-size-fits-all solution. I think different businesses have, different time frames for the repairs. Like you said, if insurance takes a while to fund a project or to fund a repair or something, with insurance, you can't just take that car home. It has to be stationary. If it was involved in an accident, if it's under investigation, things like that. So, it's probably a pain for the business to have to store that car for so long. But I don't think there's many options to move it in some cases. Where other businesses have quicker turnovers, whether it's an oil change or whatever, and they're in and out in a day or a couple hours or whatnot. So. I drive through that area a lot. I go to Quinn Caterpillar a lot. What else is over there? Cameron Welding Supply. So there's some businesses that I personally go to on a daily basis. Actually, I was there today. It kind of seems to be, it's always been, a crowded space. And I think dealing with vehicles being as large as they are, it obviously takes up a lot of space. Not to include the customers that are coming in and the employee parking and things like that. So I guess my first question is, when were these permits issued to these businesses, these licenses? And I guess my point is that the city has grown so much, probably since a lot of these permits were issued, and therefore the demand has grown a lot. So with the limited parking that was developed, I think these buildings have been there since the 90s. I'm sure a lot of the permits were issued since the 90s. I'm sure you know that, or you could tell us that. I think there should be some understanding that the city has grown population by tens of thousands, and we're still kind of limited to these spaces. So I guess question, do we have a record of when all these permits were issued, and have most of them been around for more than 15, 20 years?
No, that's good to look at that, because some of these are spec buildings back in the county days. Some have been built since then. I think a lot of businesses have matured and some phased out. But to give you a time frame, I think in the last 20 years, we've seen most of these businesses get stronger. The use permits, though, I think that's been in the last 10 years. Like, I think 2017 is when we issued one of the minor conditional use permits, but it's been growing with that. But the business owners have shared with me that they've been around for at least 20 years, most of them. But again, I'm not sure on how they sell a business and a new owner comes in. But it is growing, as you pointed out, Michael.
Sure. And on the flip side, for the businesses, and I experienced this firsthand, a lot's changed in 20 years, right? EPA standards, handling of hazardous materials, record keeping of it all. We have to record keep our tires that we dispose, or we don't even dispose of them. They come and pick them up. But the EPA tracks all that, different oils, different antifreeze, things like that. So, a lot's changed in 20 years where they have to comply as well. And, when it comes to fire and fire parking, I mean, no exceptions at all. I think that, that is absolutely crossing the line, to your point. And there's just no way around that. Like, every business, every development, every project, every construction project has to comply with, fire standards, in my opinion, above all. And I think that you can and should be hard on businesses that aren't complying with that. However that happens is up to the business, I guess up to the city. But, the parking inside the fire lanes and working on things that should be worked on indoors in the fire lanes is in my opinion, unacceptable. Again, maybe they did it 20 years ago, maybe they did it 15 years ago, but if that's not our policy or not meeting our fire codes now, then that's just got to get straightened up right away. So we talked about the turnover rate. I think it's going to be tough to manage, but, from my own personal experience, managing, getting equipment in and out of, tight areas, I think it just takes a lot more effort, and maybe a bit of laziness has come where it's just easier to keep a car here, parked it on the street, it's out of sight, out of mind, or no one cares about it. But, to have like a timeline on a customer to leave their vehicle there, either if it's been complete or if it's in between or whatever, I don't really know how you can enforce that, but I'm one that's like, hey, this equipment it's been serviced, it's been painted, it's been whatever, it's been ready. This isn't a free storage facility for you, so you have to come pick it up within 5 days of it being complete. And maybe the businesses could then work with the city, almost like, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to report your customer, but it's like, hey, this customer won't come pick up his vehicle, or, whether they owe him money, like that's another, avenue that could be tough. Like if the business hasn't been paid in full. Yeah. So I don't know, I'm up here like thinking as you're giving this presentation, and there's a lot of aspects that would cause this. And it's one thing I wrote down is like, how much of it is in the business's control? Like if it's blatantly all of their vehicles and they're being lazy and, it's all within their control, that's one thing. But if it's out of their control, if their customers disappear, if they're not responding to emails and text messages, if that's out of their control. Like, at what point do you tow a customer's vehicle off the site and to an impound and lose that customer, get a bad review on Google, things like that negatively impact your business. But, on the other side, he's looking at a fine or repercussions from the city. So, there's a lot of moving parts to this. And, fire is one thing, but finding parking on the street and being able to regulate that, I think that it needs to be like a team effort, like you said, between business and city. But it's a big task. Like I'm trying to figure like in my head as we're thinking about this right now, like how you're going to do that. For sure though, the oil stains on the street, cars sitting there. I can think of one business in particular. I don't know, I've never used them before, but I drive by it on my way to Quinn Caterpillar, and it just seems like it is like a long-term storage facility for old broken down cars. The appearance of it, you made a point of the appearance of the missing doors and stuff. I don't necessarily mind that. Of course, I mind it more like in our city, like, areas where people walk and enjoy, but, it's kind of an industrial auto area, and missing doors and bumpers parked on the street where you don't have, families and kids and things like that, like walking down and enjoying. I don't really mind that because that is an in-between, type thing. Like they're working on a truck or a car that has a missing door, and there's really no option to, like if they have legal storage in these lanes or in the streets, it's tough because, how do you pick and choose that? But.
And Michael, just on that clarification I don't think they're street legal to park them on the street in the type of repair that I've seen, because when they're missing doors and windows and bumpers, and I just don't think that you can legally park that type of vehicle on a public street. So you'd be kind of shocked. I can scroll through some pictures to show you, but I appreciate your comments tonight.
Well, and I think that I don't know how we could regulate like a time frame on it, but an allowed amount of time, which would be considered short-term parking for a specific use or a specific repair. But when it becomes long-term or more permanent parking, that should not be allowed. That is unacceptable. Let me cross some things off on my list here. Jarrett, you made a comment about how Enterprise, needed to find funding from their corporation. Great for Enterprise, but, not an option for probably a lot of small businesses there. So just wanted to make that point that, again, I don't think this is like a one-size-fits-all solution. Had a question about church. You said there was a church. If you could maybe go back to that slide that had the overview. So as we know, like church parking takes up a ton of space. And is there church parking like in this picture here?
You open up Pandora's box there. So
okay.
The parking within this is regulated by the on-site HOA. So the ownership works together on their parking allocation per each use. Development code, we have our own parking requirements for churches. They're based on a square footage calculation. But the ownership here has already allocated minimal spaces that would go to each suite owner. So that's already regulated by the HOA. I think that's one of the difficult parts about this is that we can't really get into the personal aspect of their HOA. I don't think it's working, of course, but I think the church got in there through a business license. I don't recall that coming in through a use permit.
Well, and I think that's something to be looked at. Like if the city issued a business license for a church that doesn't have adequate parking, or is that parking is used by the other businesses in the facility, like, I don't know, like how do we issue a permit if there's not adequate parking to begin with? Again, they still have to follow the rules and can't block fire lanes, but, I don't know. Do you know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, no, we're gonna look suite by suite. I think there's one or two suites that do not have a current business license, which is piquing our attention. We think that we're gonna do some walkthroughs in the next couple of months and have some specific conversations with each of the folks. The church itself has not been problematic in my opinion. It's more of the other uses on site.
Okay. Does the angled parking that's proposed, does that increase the amount of parking spaces on the street?
We'll have a delta increase of 25 spaces if we were able to complete that parking plan. We would also do some red striping because I think there's not enough red striped curb in the area. And so that'll be part of the plan is to reduce the congestion. you're talking sight distance too, right? People coming around corners, people coming out of driveways. We want to make sure that that's a safe, like you can see left and right as you're in your driver's seat before you enter the street. Because I would say that we have a lot of speeding, a lot of people that are running cars back and forth. They're driving pretty recklessly. And so there's multiple reasons why we want to get ahead of the parking and striping and signage.
Yeah, well, if that increases parking spaces, I think that's a cheap, easy, solution that should be beneficial. Hopefully we have some public comment tonight. If there's any business owners here that can, maybe shed some light on, some of the things that you guys deal with and, give us a little bit more front focus on, how your business is ran. But that's all the comments and questions I have for staff right now. So thank you.
Mr. DeSena.
Well, you were very thorough in your questions. I do want to say, though, that church that's there is very minimal. There's not a lot of like parishioners that are there. It doesn't really have much of an impact. And usually their services are more in the evening when there's a lot less congestion in that area. So I do know exactly where this is at and those businesses in those areas. When you start talking about revoking their business licenses and all of that is like, it worries me a little bit because they're small businesses, a lot of them. So I think I would just ask that before we get to that point, that we do allow adequate time for these businesses and longer term conversations. Because I guess as a small business owner myself, you sit there and you go, man, sometimes it's hard. Like, great, like you said, like kudos to Enterprise, but you're talking about a large budget. And when you talk about the development of the city being so rapid, I mean, where do they go? Where do they build a parking lot to house their stuff? So maybe we can all come up too, like drive that area, and you guys are driving that area, you said, and, offer solutions and go in there with some solutions as well for these people, not just leave it on them. Because part of the problem is we've grown so rapidly that this wasn't a problem 20 years ago. There was probably like 50 cars in there total. But now hundreds of cars probably all the time are going through there. So I would hope that we'd work together before we revoke any kind of business licenses and then, hold the HOA accountable if we're allowed to, or whoever owns the building in general, accountable for allowing business to operate without business licenses and things along that sense. So that's all.
Mr. Wojciech.
So kind of piggybacking on Commissioner LaPaglia's comment about, I don't envy you, Jared. There's 40 businesses or whatever, and you're probably going to get, each business is going to have a unique reason why it may be parking on the street. And so it's just going to be trying to go to each one and trying to figure out a plan that would fit for their specific need. It can get complicated quite quickly. And I recognize that. And I appreciate the fact that it sounds like these people are busy, which is good. It's good for us. It's good for them.
Very good.
And we'd like to keep it that way, obviously. And I do have concerns about revoking CUPs and what have you. So I'm just encouraging any business owner out there to really work with Jarrett and try to formulate a plan that would be workable for everybody. This is probably more of a law enforcement question, but the question with the 3 buildings up here and you see cars in the fire lane and what have you, and if these cars get ticketed, but maybe it's my car that I dropped off for service and all of a sudden I get a ticket in the mail, how does one deal with that? I don't know if there's an easy answer or what.
Very difficult, because like you said, we're then gonna have a newer problem. The customer is the one that has to go bail out their car. That's a very different person that comes and talks to city council. We have to be careful with that kind of thing. And I would say that it's private property, but we have an issued use permit. If they're not, one of the conditions of approval in these things is to make sure that they do not inhibit fire apparatus. It's also in our development code. So even if you don't have a use permit, you as getting a business license have to adhere to development code requirements. So to me We start with warnings and citations through our code enforcement and our fire department. After that, we can get into larger fine structures. But I think that's where we're at the end of the wire. Rather than getting into towing and all that, I think we have to then have a honest discussion and say, should this business continue to do the things that they're doing? Because most of the complaints I'm getting are from the businesses. They're saying, my customer can't park, my employees can't park, my business is being affected by those businesses. So as friendly as I want to be, at the end of the day, when you are having an adverse impact upon the public's health and safety, I'm sorry, but that's not what this city signed up to do. Right. Friendly is great. We'll have more time. I don't like to utter the word revocation, but somehow that does tend to imply what our authority is. But again, I've spent the last year of my life trying to understand, and I think there's going to be most of these businesses that will be able to comply. I think as our commissioner is saying, there's a parking management problem, right? If there was a location for a large amount of parking, which we have some ideas on, we've shared those things, but then there's a cost, right?
Right.
To doing that. And that's where I have to be careful of the city's budget. I'm not here to create parking lots to fix private businesses' problems, but we're not going to stop trying to find common ground with our businesses. I'm a big fan of small business. I think that's the strength that our city has. These are the folks that have built our city, and they're going to continue to do that. So I don't want to go after people, but if someone inhibits my fire department from saving someone's life, that's a big problem. That means we get to inherit that lawsuit for knowingly allowing that to continue.
Right.
And so I think with the ghost ship fire in Oakland, California, we got to be careful. When it comes to public safety, the courts have blamed cities for not acting in amount of time. So there's a point where not everyone's going to have a great conclusion to this process, but I think most of the businesses will find common ground. But I just lend that back to you,
Sure.
Commissioner, because I do appreciate that businesses pay taxes, they create jobs, they are a strength and a backbone of our economy, and so I will never be lost in that importance.
I know there's some empty vacant lots, dirt lots around there. Is that an option assuming the property owners would allow parking on those, or is that something that's beyond this?
Certainly, we've shared that we would love to see some shared parking agreements between property owners. You would have to improve some of those properties. We can't allow dirt lots because stormwater regulations and other state mandates, but we would like to work with people for the most minimum improvements that would be required for a short-term fix. I would say that the two lots nearest to here, I think we're going to see new folks coming into town and occupying those. So those will have new public sidewalks, new driveway access points. So that'll be really exciting. You know, we'd like to grow the area. But as we grow, I want to make sure that we contain some of the folks that might not cure their own problems. But we're here to help. I mean, honestly, we're going to have a lot more focused meetings. But the result of that will be, let's see who can help themselves with our guidance.
Okay. Thank you. No other questions?
Mr. Beamish.
Thank you. Nice presentation. A couple things I wanted to ask you about. Essentially, I'm pro-business, and I appreciated you saying that the city is pro-business. I put exclamation mark. But I'd like to know, in light of what my colleagues have said, what the timeline is for doing some of these things. And specifically, so in the background material, talked about working with businesses that has challenges complying with what we would like. And then it goes on to say there was an October 17th, 2024 meeting. Was the effort of the city to reach out to these businesses prior to that meeting? So question, how long have you been on this issue, and what's your timeline going forward with the striping, the new spaces, and to get a sense of how soon some of these businesses would have to adhere to the conditions?
No, thank you, Commissioner Beamish. About 6 months before the workshop, I started to really get a little bit more involved. I had sat down with our code enforcement They shared with me the couple of years prior that they were trying to get cooperation. In talking with their code enforcement officers, there was a lot of folks that were just ignoring their citations. So we went out together to talk with a few businesses. I was getting an understanding of the different pressures that each business was in. It's all unique. Some share properties, some have their own legal lots. So I want to understand, what is your unique pressure and where do you need help from? I will take about the next 3 to 6 months to have additional meetings with businesses that are interested. And then after that, then we're going to focus on ratcheting it up. So again, I have solutions that I've thought through. Businesses have some of their solutions, but we'll give another 3 to 6 months to focus on that one. And again, we're going to find people that will, like Enterprise is proposing us something that they need time. We'll give them time because they've already cleaned up the property, if you will, right? But we have to look at what is the adverse impact today versus what they're going to fix. If they're going to tell me it's going to take them 2 more years to not park in the fire lane, I'm sorry. That's an immediate issue. That's happening today. I can't send my fire department out to these properties like that. That's going to cause an impact to us. But if we find, Tom, that there's not cooperation, we're going to have to bring that back and probably to your hearing body after we meet with them and their legal counsel. So,
The attendance at the workshop, do you know what the percentage of the businesses attended that workshop? And are you going to have additional workshops in addition to reaching out to the businesses?
No more workshops. I think I've met the right folks and we've had some good discussions. But I would say that I think we are keenly aware of what we need to do as next steps, and I think we're focused. So in the next 3 to 6 months, positive engagement through meetings. Then we'll see what we need to shake from the tree, who's not working with us, and then we'll focus our attention on those folks.
Okay. One question, it's kind of an aside, is with regards to the state stormwater regulations. If I remember correctly, the fines that the city could incur are very heavy, aren't they?
Very heavy. And there's a permit authority that we're allowed to. And so if they feel that you're not doing a good job regulating pollutants, then there's bigger issues. That's Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Right.
Not the folks that you want to talk to about this stuff.
I think your philosophy of what I'm getting is that you'd like to come with solutions together, working with the businesses, which I appreciate. Having had a small business myself, these kinds of things drive you crazy, for one thing, and sometimes it's difficult to adhere to what the city would like to do. So the more you reach out to businesses in a real proactive way is great. And I'm not sure what the conditional use permit process here in meaning, I would hope, and I assume that they have, is that when a business comes before the Planning Commission or the council, that they really understand each individual each condition in that permit, and that businesses, I would encourage, and maybe the chamber encourages them, but they need to understand the ramifications of a specific issue in a conditional use permit, maybe 10 years down the road, but that's obviously difficult because we don't have a crystal ball to see what the future holds. But businesses need to be held to the conditional use permit and the requirements that they've agreed to. Having said that, I agree with my colleagues. What I'm hearing is the revocation process is the last resort, the really last. And if that were to come before us, I would want to know that we've done everything possible to help that business find solutions, offer solutions. I think shared parking is great. I think your extra spaces and the lining is a good way to go on the signage, but we need to go cautiously, as I said, in a proactive business manner. So thank you.
So my comments, I think before we take steps forward, I just want to offer a perspective of the past. How did we get here? So I'll just kind of share, I started working for the city as a police officer in 1992, so 33 years ago. And as a young cop, I spent a lot of time patrolling that area of that industrial park there when it wasn't as full of businesses as it currently is now. What I will tell you is most of those structures were already there, whether those businesses were the same businesses or not, but most of them were automotive-related businesses. And so to kind of back up a little bit further, this is when Jefferson was a two-lane road, and everything from Murrieta to Hotswell is two-lane road all the way through town. And there was really virtually nothing, couple, I think Cryoquip, it's something else now that's on Jefferson. But from that point south all the way into Temecula to Winchester, there was nothing, even on the Temecula side of the city limits there at Cherry, right there. So all the automotive businesses really on this side of town, that's where they were. They were in Murrieta, and they were specifically, I think the city did a very good job of attracting businesses to that area specifically. So we kind of, I don't want to say, well, I'm going to say maybe we caused some of our own fortunes, so to speak, right? Because we concentrated the automotive businesses intentionally there. We developed an auto mall in that same area there to kind of promote those same type of businesses. So they all flocked to that area. Now, on the opposite side of Jefferson right there, there was a small industrial park. It was the only one there, and that's where the old city hall was, right on Corning and Beckman. School district headquarters were there. There was a couple other businesses on the cul-de-sac. But virtually nothing south and nothing north. The pony fields, all that was there was just the pony fields. So that has all been infill development and probably some better parking regulations and things like that. Notice on that side of Jefferson, because those were all built in the 90s and maybe early 2000s in that era, and that was all done by the city. These buildings that we're talking about, I can, as I'm visually in my mind going back, Date Street, Hobie Circle, Pierce, Pear, Sandalwood, Nick Lane, all those streets those buildings were there, and many of them were there, and they were built under the county standards and regulations and parking restrictions. A few of them were built, there's a couple fill-ins on Sandalwood and Nick Lane on the north side that were done under the control of the city after the city incorporated in 91, so early, mid 1990s. I say that because some of the same businesses are still like Calbert, they've been there 25 years, and you mentioned Enterprise maybe not that long, but and my memory on the church on Hobie Circle dates to the mid 2000s, maybe 2006-ish, and I was on DRC at the time, representing the police department. I do believe that came through DRC, but it may have not had a MCUP or a CUP or anything like that. I'm just going back on memory on what I can recall back at that period of time. The point is that, we've attracted many of these auto-related businesses. I was going to suggest, hey, have we looked at angled parking? And you answered that question. I think that's an outstanding idea of having the angled parking in there. You mentioned a little bit about the maybe some signage, maybe alluded to some parking or maybe restricting overnight parking. I would suggest if that's what the city decided to do, that you supplement that to deal with some of the spillage there, that even if we had to amend our street sweeping contract, I know it's unusual to have street sweeping in the evenings and nights, but that might solve some of the spillage issues if we amended the contract. These businesses are bringing business into the city. It's not that much more of a cost, in a perspective wise that we clean those streets maybe at the time when no one's parked there. Just a general thought to do that. Enterprise, I appreciate and benefit by the fact that they're a large corporation, right? So I'm guessing they probably had to make a business decision. Do we stay in this facility and invest in making some site improvements, or do we take it elsewhere? And I'm getting the feeling like they decided to stay, which is great because they're a great business. They do a lot of indoor parking with their rental vehicles. I know I've used their business before, but some of the problems might be at pickup and drop, or typically if you're dropping off a vehicle there. But I'm glad that they're working with the city. That's great that they're doing that, and I'm sure all the businesses want to do that. It's just, some of their restrictions or limitations or funding, those type of things like that. You mentioned some of the striping on the street. One of the things I remember getting complaints working for the police department before I retired was the corners of these intersections. When people can't find a place to park, guess what? They park on the corners. The delivery people, the trucks pulling in and out there couldn't see around the corner. So yeah, technically it's illegal in the vehicle code to park in an intersection. But if you mentioned that you might restripe some of the curbing, you might want to consider maybe the corners as well too, because that solves the other issue of some of the complaints that I recall used to come in that I think still go on. You mentioned, so let me ask you this. So what if let's say the church or a non-automotive business wanted to move and relocate, and another automotive business just wanted to occupy that site, certainly zoned for it. They could do it. But what you're stating is we have a kind of a system overload here. Does the city have any ability to say, no, you can't because we got too many? Or would the city even want to do something like that? It would add to the problem, but yet it would get more automotive business in the city.
We're seeing that same problem occur in our industrial areas. So as you mentioned, Dennis, on the other side of Jefferson, we have all those spec buildings built by the county. Or in the county days. Yep. Those were built with a whatever, meaning that if you had a business move in, but the parking calcs are per square foot. Over time, they condoize these things and they form HOAs. And so they have a shared parking agreement, if you will. But every time we get a new church, which has a lot of parking, they say, well, based on the square footage, we only need the spaces. Well, yeah, on Sundays, you have more intensity. That's not going to affect the Monday through Fridays. So there are times where you can have a use that is actually more intense, like the church we saw tonight, right? The questions you asked, Michael, was, is that an existing capacity or are we going to add more to that? What we're finding is that these sites cannot accommodate the cumulative intensity over time, but we do ask those questions, Dennis, whether it's building license or use permit, is can you park with what you have? I think the problem is that over time, the HOAs and some of the other folks that run these businesses, whether they own the whole thing or they have an HOA, there's decisions made that don't always yield a parkable site. We're seeing that off of McAlvey, where we have the school district. We have a couple of private schools, private churches. Cumulatively, it might work on paper, but we just see that with Denso and other things, it's just there's no street parking at all. Although we try, I think a lot of times we have to put faith into the applicant that they are going to implement something consistent with the statement of operations that they gave us. But I think it's becoming a more investigative type of thing at this point. And I think that's why we're bringing this forward to you, is that there's a tipping point that we've hit. And I think we have to start taking a stronger look into these requests about moving in, especially when you have an intensive use that's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But our current code requirements would allow someone to take over that church and come in with a business license and just an inspection and go from there. So you make a good point, though, Dennis. Is there another way to look at that?
Well, I'm just wondering, it's a catch-22. So what you're saying is okay, we allow them to come in, but I'm hearing the flip side is if they have too many cars and too much business, so to speak, then they could get their CUP revoked. And so it's kind of like, hey, we want you to come in, but there's a possibility we could take your business away, which is it's oxymoronic and it's unfortunate. I appreciate that we're looking at solving the issue there and safety violations and things like that and being strategic about it. And we got some great businesses there. You know, the site to the north, right on the corner of Pear and Madison right there. Yeah, I got some great automotive shops, paint shops, those type of things like that. But the parking lot as it was designed would be the typical, hey, you pull up, you park there, and you go into the business. And they park as many cars as they can, because some of them do custom cars and things like that, and they park indoors if you got a valuable, because they don't want things stolen. But the vast majority of all that parking in that parking lot is, and they're parking in the non-parking stall aisles, they're filling it all up. It's just a hodgepodge of cars, and I can't certainly blame them. It's better than putting it on the street, and so they want to keep the cars off the street, and that's where the customers typically have to park. So there's a lot of comings and goings with that. But I do appreciate. I just want to comment that it's looking at how did we get here. There's a long storied past of how we got here, and we've created the synergy that, in my opinion, that we wanted those businesses, and now we've got a lot. So how do we solve it? I don't have a easy solution.
Well, we're not often handed a good problem to fix, right? So in one sense, it's great to see how busy these businesses are. The other side of it is that we're here for public safety. Right. And so we as staff have to make this call. But again, really love the input that you guys are giving me tonight. These are some angles I hadn't thought through, so we'll be taking that away from that this evening.
A couple quick questions on the north end of Nick Lane, where against the channel. I know that people park in the dirt lot right there, which they got to do what they got to do. And is there eventual plans for Madison to basically kind of go over that channel? There's probably no. It's been like that as long as I've been here, but I don't know if that to connect it. You know, with Madison all the way to Murrieta Hot Springs, will it eventually go over or will it not?
It's on the CIP plan, if you will. There is a owner of an approved tentative track map that's on the southern part of that. They'd be responsible for putting in the initial drive lane and a fair share contribution. We have tried to reach out to that owner to see if they would be willing to work with the businesses in the areas to do some interim parking area. I think some businesses would like to do that, but others feel that that's really hard to put my customer's car or that $80,000 car, because I think a few folks shared with me that they lost their wheels and their hubcaps and stuff. So it's hard to secure vehicles in that type of environment. It's very porous. You have the creek, you have these dark streets. And so those are things that we would love to revisit if we could. It's just on the edge of a wetland, so you got to treat that stormwater so it doesn't go into that creek area. But
no, I get it. It was a constant cat and mouse game, and it was a target-rich place where crooks would come and rip off cars and car parts and things like that. And that's why I spent so much time, and I still have those streets committed to memory. 30 years later, you know.
I found that one owner is a mixed martial arts guy, so I'd be careful with anybody that driving down Nick Lane.
And then one last question or a comment. I know Mr. Wojcik brought up the fire lane and private property and stuff. I just know from practical experience, you know, the police department, we would typically, you know, respond and ticket cars and things like that on public, you know, on public roadways. But the private property was kind of left to, like what you said, the HOAs and things like that. So, you know, we didn't, unless it was something that was actively, you know, blocking engines from our fire department friends here, you know, we wouldn't typically get involved. So it really is a private property type of, you know, concern or issue that they have to solve on their own. So, or code to deal with it. So that's where the dividing line was. But anyways, I just wanted to, you know, kind of share a little perspective and history as to why we're dealing with this in 2025. So with that, any more comments by?
Yeah, maybe just one question, Chair, thank you. Jared, is there like, would you consider there to be like a level of importance for each of these issues? And did you have a list on your slide I think obviously fire access being at the top, maybe something non-negotiable, and have you talked to the businesses about like each item in its perspective of importance?
Yeah, I mean, number one, fire lane, can't block that.
Yeah.
That's just a non-starter. Because again, you're talking about a customer, an employee, people that you don't even know. I mean, how can you affect their lives?
Totally.
It's a big deal. We have a general plan response time of 6 minutes that we have to get to places, and we can't waste 5 minutes going around and looking for another way to access the site. I think most people forget when the fire truck is on its way, it has to get there. And I think a vehicle can't be moved. I'm told, it's just temporary, Jarrett. There's nothing temporary about every day going out there and seeing that. That's not temporary, right? But list of importance is, second, don't park on our public street if you have a leaking car or if it's a customer vehicle. That's our asset. Your customers can park on there. We'll let your employees park on there. But it's not conducive to vehicles that are leaking fluids or in repair or don't have plates. We're finding a lot of people are processing their used cars or new cars, and they don't have plates in the streets for 3-4 days at a time. And so these are violations of law, and we need that to stop. And so I'm going to focus on those things.
So I would, if you don't mind, I would say, non-plated cars in the street, is one thing. Cars leaking oil could be a separate thing, which, you're right. You don't want to screw up the water boards and, get them involved. But, like in construction, we mitigate that by putting, small pools or buckets or pans underneath our car. And it's something that can be managed. I don't know if we have the time for code enforcement to be going over there and, enforcing and checking probably hundreds of pans under cars to see if they're, full or leaking on the streets or anything. But is there any type of like middle ground that you can see for implementing some type of mitigation for cars that are potentially leaking fluids on the street? Or is it just, again, non-negotiable?
I've received fines on projects from Regional Water Quality Control Board in the millions. That's what we're talking about.
Projects being built or existing businesses?
When a city has been found in violation of state stormwater regulations, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You get a fine. Mm-hmm. And so I would say I'm not going to have staff looking at drip plans. I'm going to just make sure that cars are new or newer and they're not leaking. I mean, that's the responsibility of any business is if you have a car that's leaking, fix it, but don't store it on our street.
And I agree. And I do think that the responsibility falls on the business.
Yeah.
I don't know if not allowing any parking on the street is the ultimate solution, but it is the responsibility of the business to make sure that it's not leaking on the street. So, if those cars are in the parking lot, still managed by some type of oil pan underneath that's serviceable or whatnot could be a solution.
Yeah.
But again, maybe just food for thought.
No, totally. I mean, again, I get passionate about just normal small things that I think people can do very well. But I think the takeaway is that, we'll continue to thread with the businesses in a positive manner. We'll bring back any folks that we feel that we've exhausted that ability of.
Sure.
And I would add to your point, I know what some cities have done because of that issue is they've had, in order for people to force them to move vehicles, is hey, street sweeping on this side of the street on this day and not on this day. And I don't know if that's where you're thinking with your parking restrictions or if that is even something that you're entertaining, but that would be something that might help mitigate or clean up the street, so to speak, to where maybe we wouldn't be subject to a fine if there's.
Sure, because it gets them to move the car.
It gets them to move the car. And then I would just add too, think of it this way. You got a customer who says, hey, look, I have an old car. I want to get it restored. I want to get it fixed. So they take it down to the business down there. It's not in running order. It hasn't been registered in years, right? Or they have a P&O, plan non-operation on it, so they pay the $5 and keep it currently registered. Or hey, it was their grandpa's car, and they decide, hey, they're going to fix it up, put it back in service, and because it has sentimental value to it, right? So they take it down to one of the shops down there. They leave it and trust it with them, and so they think, hey, it's all copacetic. I'm not parking it on the street. And then lo and behold, the car gets towed or something like that because an employee who's forced to kind of, move a car carousel around and moving cars and parks it on the street at the wrong time, then it gets, towed away or something like that. Not the fault of the customer. It goes back to the business. And of course now it just causes all kinds of issues. I'm just something to kind of think of that how things, again, how did we get here? And it's because we promoted businesses that we want here in the city. And I think it was Mr. DeCina that kind of alluded that, hey, we've got a lot of, and you mentioned it as well too, we've got more people moving here, we got residents, we got more dwelling units. Well, it comes with cars. If people aren't buying new cars for whatever reason, cars need to get repaired, and here we are. We just don't have enough locations and businesses, and that's just an older area of the city that we've always had that 30 plus years. So with that, I think I've made my point. With that, Madam Secretary, do we have anybody who wishes to speak on this?
Yes, we have Casson Klein.
Mr. Klein, please step forward.
I'd like to provide some additional. I want to very enthusiastically compliment Jarrett and staff for being proactive with this. I'm sure it hasn't been easy. Also, I would say that probably everybody in this room subscribes to less government. And so under that guise, please keep in mind that it's not government's responsibility to make sure that these businesses or any business is compliant with our codes and their conditions of approval. Historically, this is not dissimilar from the issue the parking issue that was created by Murrieta Valley High School. And Michael, you were probably still in high school when that issue came about. And look what the city did at the Ranchos, right? We closed off Hayes Avenue. We put up no parking signs. A little more historical perspective on what Jarrett brought about or talked about on Elm Street 2 and the Jefferson Avenue Business Corridor. I served on the Planning Commission when Elm Street and Elm Street 2 was approved. Subsequent to the approval of those projects, the city adopted a parking table, I believe it's table 316, and I have represented probably over the course of years a dozen proposed businesses that wanted to come in and either purchase or rent some of those industrial condos. And we weren't able to because we couldn't provide the parking that was required in that table. I don't see how that wouldn't apply to this area. Further to the north, Jefferson Avenue Business Corridor was something that was very unique, that land use to Murrieta. It was parked at an industrial rate. However, there were quasi-commercial uses that went in. And before and during the downturn, when commercial lease rates were high, and the city, in an effort to bring along commercial sales and sales tax revenue, they allowed more commercial uses to go into the buildings in the Jefferson Avenue Business Corridor, even though it was underparked. Why do I bring this up? It will work itself out. Dennis, you'll recall that a former council member that has a 64 Lincoln had it parked in his driveway and got a code violation. And you, myself, and former police chief Sean Haddon went over to Brandon Lane's house and helped him push it in his garage, only after his wife moved things out of her garage and cleared it, right? So when you bring the hammer down, people become compliant. When I was on commission, we denied 2 batch plants that were appealed to city council, and in their infinite wisdom, they overturned our denial. Subsequent to both of the batch plants were operating outside of their hours of their conditional use permits. Basically, they were running their trucks 24 hours a day. One of the batch plants submitted an amendment to their CUP. They wanted to do some recycling, and I happened to be chairman at the time of the Planning Commission. And I told the city manager and the planner and the city attorney that I was going to treat that hearing as a revocation because they weren't in compliance with their CUP, and that application was, they rescinded their application until I left the Planning Commission. So my point being, be very cautious what I'm hearing out here is, if I may, I'll wrap it up. What I'm hearing is certainly we're considerate of these businesses, but it is not our responsibility as government to find solutions for them, and they will find a way. And sometimes it will require a revocation hearing to get them to be compliant. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Do we have any other speakers?
Yes, Kelly Jones.
Good evening, Kelly. Hi.
I'm on the other side now.
Yeah.
So as most know, we manage probably 95% of the property owners associations in Temecula, Murrieta, Lake Elsinore, Wildemar. Everybody knows I am very, very, very pro-growth. I also do commercial real estate, we're pro-growth. I took some notes that I wanted to talk about. Totally agree with the small business owner. Code enforcement we deal with them from a property management standpoint. They have their hands full. Police department has their hands full. The problem that we see is, Dennis, I think you're right. It was, hey, be pro-growth, but on the same token, we kind of did ourselves a disservice. Every project now is overparked. They're parking on streets, they're parking at Ziggy's, they're parking anywhere they can find a solution, they're parking there. And they're staying for not a week, not 2 weeks, not a month, but 2 months, sometimes 3 months. We do our part, but then collectively with the city of Murrieta, Temecula, law enforcement, code enforcement, they're assisting us as well. Jared's been amazing, the city's been amazing to help us, but we need your help. And then just, again, the auto repair, well, I don't know what's going on. There must be a lot of money in the business because there are so many that want to continue to open. As commercial brokers, I can tell you as landlords, a lot of people are turning them away now because there's so many of them. And so with that said, we have our great ones, but then we have our ones that are not so great. We have really, tough experiences with them. So again, working collectively with the city, we're happy to help. Do what we can to just make sure they're in the correct zoning, make sure they're, they're CUPs or they're temp CUPs, or I have one, for instance, that's right in front of me that was issued by Cynthia Kinzer in 2017. They're not following it. There's safety issues, there's blocking, there's supposed to be indoor vehicle sales only. And then there was one other thing I wanted to bring up was no registration license on the vehicles. So these are things that I think, again, I don't think revoking CUPs, but again, paying attention to CUPs that the Planning Commission is looking at. I think we need to be, as we continue to grow and grow and grow, just to be a little more stringent on them. So if there's any other questions, that's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. It was good seeing you. Madam Secretary, any other speakers?
Yes, we have Blake Warren.
Good evening, Council. I'll make this pretty brief. My name is Blake Warren. I am not the owner of West Coast Exotic Cars, but I'm here representing that business. I just want to start out and say I appreciate the efforts of the city. We have had some problems in the past of cars parked on the street that were kind of an issue for the safety of clients of ours coming into our building, that the city did a really good job of cleaning that up for us. So I want to say, this is obviously an important matter to all the businesses that are in the Auto Park Mall. So I do appreciate that this is the subject matter tonight. I just have a couple points that I wanted to bring up regarding some of the suggested plans. So I think that it's important to know from the perspective of somebody that is obviously there day in and day out that I think the marking of the diagonal spots will probably drastically reduce a lot of the issues that we're talking about. I think it's a really good idea. But to note, we often, you may not notice this if you occasionally come by, we very often, the auto sales businesses have trucks coming in and out on a daily basis that are delivering cars. So it's easy for me to say this because we have a big property at our disposal that these trucks can come utilize when they're dropping these cars off. So they actually come into our facility and deliver their cars on our premises. But I think BMW, Volkswagen, some of the other dealerships that are on Auto Park Mall don't necessarily have that space or that ability. So if you're looking at adding diagonal spaces and reducing the width of the street, just keep in mind that we often have semi trucks with 6 loaders that are delivering cars, dropping those off during the working hours of the day. And that might pose problems with safety and traffic if now the fairly wide streets are now more narrow. So just something to consider that that could cause could cause problems there. I think that while this is definitely an important subject to us, I think that we work really hard at West Coast to make sure that our facility is maintained properly. And I go pick up trash every day if I see it outside our building. We want to encourage anything that makes Auto Park Mall a more beautiful area that attracts more customers. I do think that it's very important to continue the small business feel of a lot of the area and encourage that those businesses, find solutions, find a balance that helps those businesses stay intact, because at the end of the day, they're bringing, automotive specific clientele to the area. So I would ask that you guys, work at solutions that help maintain those small businesses that are in the area. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Any additional speakers?
Yes, Robert Schuman.
Good evening, Council. I came in here just to kind of get some information. Didn't think I would find myself talking. My family operates an auto repair business in the middle of this chaos. 2 questions I have on the slanted parking is, what is the plan for larger vehicles? The majority of our business is on construction vehicles, dump trucks, large F-350s. The planning on your angled parking would be look more towards a Honda Civic, I would imagine. Second question I have is, it's already an issue. We don't have sidewalks in our neighborhood. Being our customers are dropping off, trying to walk down to Siggy's to get to bite to eat, or walk down to Enterprise to get a rental car at the end of the street, which thank God they moved in the last few years. It's been a blessing for us. You're gonna narrow the street down. The customers are already walking in the street next to the cars. What are we gonna do to improve that? The next issue is not just myself, my neighbors are electricians, HVAC guys, they all have work trucks, they all have large vehicles. Same thing with the deliveries, like the cars that get delivered to all the other places. What are we gonna do about getting our pedestrians and our customers safely down the side of the roadway? That would be the only concern I have as a business owner. I have altered our business plan. We also no longer work on RVs just to help accommodate with the parking situation that we've had. I've also been very stringent on 3-day pickup rules for my customers, that I charge storage fees because it became an issue of cars lingering around. Seems like people always approve repairs and then they don't have the money to fix it. I'm now in the process right now of a lien sale of a customer that's incarcerated. Found out through other channels that he's incarcerated, and now I have a vehicle that I have to lien sell to then get rid of. But the lien sale process in the state has also been refined, and now I'm looking at anywhere from 90 days to 11 months like the last one, because the vehicle value is over $5,000. So where do I fall in this guideline of a vehicle I have to move around because I repaired it, I went to jail? I'm trying to be lenient and stringent, but where do I comply with this? Same thing as I don't own the vehicle, now the registration's out and I have to move it in and out or around the shop. I'm torn here. So that's actually an active process that I've been trying to find a family member to this guy that's incarcerated to hopefully pay his bill to get his car out of my shop. The next thing, like I said, is we work on very large vehicles. They're all compliant. We have dump trucks that come in. I have construction workers with trailers. We try to accommodate, and I also have vehicles that are dropped off in the middle of the night, and I can't always control that they dropped off a car that blew a motor or has an oil line that blew in the middle of the night, or they drop it on a Friday and I find it on a Monday. So in my business practice, we do our best to clean the oil spills the best we can, but I can't always control the things that we didn't have dropped off, and that's one of the things I just want to bring up. Thank you.
Those are real problems. I mean, those are real situations where, you know.
And do you want me to answer those questions?
Yeah,
before the next speaker, or
I
wait
just
till
want
the
to
next
make sure,
speaker?
yeah, see if we have any more speakers. Are we?
There are no more speakers.
No more speakers. Jared, I see Mr. Strohsteiner came up as well, too.
Yeah, it's always good to sit next to
Yeah,
Doug. I
that's
feel
right.
safer. I do want to respond, and I really appreciate meeting with Robert. I think I learned the most by meeting with him. His type of business was deeply affected by COVID, meaning that I think I learned from him that before COVID, insurance claims were about 24 hours. After COVID, weeks and weeks. And so if you can think about that, his business model changed overnight, not because of what he was doing, but because of the entire country was changing all of their requirements. So I do want to say that can I get the PowerPoint back? I want to show you where we're going to focus on the striping and the strategy, because I did think about folks like Robert here. So this is hard to read, but this is a larger view of it. What I did was I wanted us to focus on the areas where we have the new and used auto sales and some of the more intensive businesses together. You'll notice that this does not extend down the lanes where American Diesel is. He does have a point. We don't have sidewalks everywhere in this area. It is problematic for pedestrians. In this area, we do have sidewalks. We'll have 2 new users ultimately in the future on those dirt lots, and those will have sidewalks in the frontage. But it's a very good point. There's not the best circulation for all street users in the area, but we're gonna try to use, I think our majority of our issue is this area, so this is where our striping and signage plan will be focused. But I do anticipate more meetings with companies like American Diesel. Really happy that they're in our town. As he shared tonight, they're making changes, and that's positive for us, right? We wanna see, can they make changes? And that's not something that through a punitive lens I'm gonna look at. I'm gonna say, yeah, that's much better than it was last year. And so that's, I think, a good example of a business working with us. They came to us and presented the unique issues their business has, and we listened to that one. But at the same time, I think we're gonna focus on the more problematic areas that are in Auto Mall Parkway, Hobie Circle, and just, I think, Pear Street.
You know, just a couple other comments as I hear Kelly's comments about the demand for new similar businesses wanting to come into the city or the area or whatever. So do we have other interest of other developers that maybe want to expand, take this concept of automotive repair area, if you will, or shops that would be eligible elsewhere in the city, where this could, we would be building other sites, or the developers would be coming and building other sites. And my point is that lessons learned from how we got here to alleviate some of the areas if these type of businesses were to expand to other areas of the city.
There are other business park zoned areas in our city. We're very popular. It's hard to find anything. Try to find a house in our town. You know, it's really difficult. But I would say that the hardest thing for a young business is the startup costs. They could not afford to purchase and construct land on their own. That's just impossible. They have to rent and then become owners and then go through that. But I would say that there's limited capacity for a new build, but we do have a lot of developers that could find common ground with working on the right use type. We have had a couple of these businesses looking at their own private storage facilities in other parts of the town. We're hopeful that they'll continue and build those things, because if they can cure their own problem with an off-site parking lot, that's perfect. We'd like to work with them on those solutions.
And I would add another comment to what you had mentioned about the sidewalks. I would venture to say that probably the reason why there's no sidewalks in that area is because they were built under the county standards, which didn't require it at the time. Where the city does require that, you look on the other side of Jefferson, you got sidewalks there, and any of the newer developments all have that there. So that's, you know, by virtue of the fact it's been around for 35 years or better, That's part of the issue there. Question, as far as like any future CUPs or any other businesses, and this might be a city attorney question as well too, but I know when I have to take a car in for service, maybe in that area, I call ahead of time and say, hey, can I bring my car in on Tuesday? They said, no, I don't have any room for you. So hey, can you bring Wednesday or, a couple weeks later? And so is there anything that the city can do to say, hey, in the CUP or any future, say, hey, look, they have to maintain the scheduling to where they're just saying, yeah, bring it on down, and they park it. You look at that picture, that overhead you have on Hobie there. I don't know, there's 8 suites there. How many of them are automotive? But it's parked up, all the way around the building. How many of them are abandoned, or not abandoned, but inoperable vehicles that maybe one of the tenants, and 50 of them belong to one particular tenant. There might be only 5 of them that belong to a neighboring tenant. But it's the one who's got the 50 there who says, yeah, bring it on down. I got a place I can store it. Does the city have any ability to, per tenant to say, hey, look, you can only have so many, and somehow, rather than revoking a CUP, of maybe having some leverage to say, look, you can only have so many attributed to your site at any given period of time, something to where it wouldn't be overly accommodated or concentrated.
Yeah, the use permits that I've processed as a planner, I'm very specific. I have them show the spaces on the plot plan. I give me a statement of operations that shows that these are the number of spaces and that they will not exceed it. And so I think our current review process conditions and focuses on that. But I think what we're talking about is you become successful, right? You're selling too many ice creams, right? Too many customers. I don't know how to put a genie on that bottle. But that's a very good question, Dennis, because I think that's where, if you exceed your use permit boundaries, what do we do? Often it's a meeting to see what we can do. This is something that happens with some churches and other things where they do become very popular, which is a great thing. But we'll talk about that internally in our department, Dennis.
Yeah.
But it's tough. How do you over-condition a project, right?
Yeah, I'm just looking for potential solutions here and some ideas. As you look at this overhead, it's pretty impacting. And I would venture to bet that most of those vehicles don't move day in, day out.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
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 Chair, I can briefly answer your one point that you made regarding if a revocation hearing does come up before this commission, your choice is not necessarily limited to just revoke or no. You could reopen and look at those conditions and perhaps revise those conditions, revoke the old and reissue with some new conditions if that particular case had definable conditions that we could enforce that you wanted to modify or change. That would be something to consider on a case-by-case basis if it got brought to you in a revocation hearing.
I guess that's kind of what I'm looking at. Is there some leverage rather than just, shutter it? If there's some other type of options that we could impose that would make things maybe a little bit more fair and would not impact some of the neighboring business and then have the spillage that just kind of continues. Yep.
I do think, though, to Mr. Takassen's point, though, is like limited government involvement as much as possible, right? So it's a slippery slope. We start telling the businesses, like, you have to wait till Wednesday to bring them in, or so, kind of go down that road. I've kind of would be opposed to that to a certain degree. I think it's more like what's being proposed, which is like, hey, come up with a solution for when it does happen, that you do grow bigger, and let's work together on that. I'm not quite sure telling a business, hey, you're doing great, but stagger your business or tell your business no, because that would be like, don't get rich, don't make money. So, and I don't think anyone would want to do that. So I would like to keep visiting the points of what was brought up into the slides today, where we're working together and we're kind of going, hey, business, come up with a plan, whether it's parking, here's some ideas we have, what do you have? Put the onus kind of on the business to figure that out and kind of lay out the standard of what we're looking for, and then the business takes care of what that is, but we don't cross that line of the parking lot as best as possible with public safety in mind, of course.
Yeah, my point is that many of the responsible businesses will kind of self-police themselves and say, and want to be a good neighbor with the other tenants. So they'll schedule, hey, don't bring it down. I'm impacted, or I don't want to have this overflow and take away parking spots from my neighboring businesses. Others aren't so polite, I suppose.
Yeah, and Chair, it seems like we have two of those businesses here with, Blake and Robert. Like, they seem like they're wanting to comply and help and improve things. But for staff, I think one suggestion that I'd like to recommend is maybe designating loading and unloading zones. Blake brought up a great point that if you have all these diagonal parking spaces, so maybe there's an appropriate place to put those, like in more of the repair area, and in more of the auto sales area, you can have loading and unloading zones in maybe like the less popular areas to park cars, like up maybe close to the freeway at, where it curves, or down by West Coast. And I thought it was good that Robert, kind of highlighted how some things are out of their control. And I alluded to that during my comment, is that, not everything is in their control. Like, guys in jail can't pay his bill, and it's now becomes his problem, Robert's problem, and Robert's fines to manage this guy's car, and that's just not fair. So again, I want to emphasize, like I said earlier, I don't think this is a one-size-fits-all. I, of course, encourage and want staff to find solutions to this with the businesses without limiting, their, I guess, network of what they can work on. So I think that was all. And I'd also like to just address the one thing about the parking space sizes. It's going to be tough because, like he was saying, some of his vehicles are big. He's already pushing away, working on motorhomes and stuff, which is a huge industry, just to be maybe more compliant or like, a friendly neighbor. But, if something exceeds the parking size, like a big truck or a dump truck or whatever, that there should be like some leniency. So just want to make those few points to staff.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to that part of the auto mall area. I've gotten a lot of cooperation from those businesses. But I would say that our development code is written today that your loading is on your property. So just throwing it out there that conditional use permits have already been signed, and the development code reads that you shall provide an on-site loading and unloading area. I found 18-wheelers all the time in the middle of that lane blocking traffic, causing sight distance issues. So it's a very unsafe situation. It's not safe today to unload in the street. So I would say that angled parking would make it safer, but I think you have to look a little bit deeper about, is there a centroid of an area that we can find for loading? That's a good question, but I'll have to come back to my design team with that.
Okay.
Yeah, but it may cause us to look at the development code. So I'm just pointing that out there, is that some of these things are embedded in the code as a requirement.
Sure.
And so I have to be careful with that.
Well, I think that there's, looking at the overview of everything, I think there's spots that would work better with this parking design, and then there would be spots that would work better for maybe an unloading and loading zone. I get what you're saying, that it's part of their responsibility to unload and load in their facility. If it's not obtainable, maybe that's something that the city can help, make obtainable. So that's all.
Thank you.
Commissioners, good evening.
Good evening.
Doug Stroh-Snyder, Murrieta Fire Marshal. I think it's important that for you, from my perspective, to understand the reason they're here. They have been working for years, plural, years, to try and gain compliance. We don't want to be here in front of you right now. We absolutely don't. And you don't see us for other areas of the city. We're not down, we don't have these issues when people are responsible, when business owners are responsible. That's why they're here. And obviously, we came here to support this because we wanted to take a little more enforcement action. And they said, hey, you know what, we're going to be in front of the Planning Commission. Can you hold off? If I showed you pictures from last weekend down there in this exact area, there is absolutely no way you could get a firefighter with a hose line through the area, let alone a fire apparatus in the fire lanes. Complete disregard for the requirements. We do have that ability to fine, to issue citations, but it's always about education. Just like law enforcement, you always want to start with education, and then you work towards enforcement. And this has gone on for years. That's why this group's in front of you. A couple things I did want to bring up. Fire lane, people love to paint the curb red where they don't want somebody to park. If you go down there, you'll see red fire lane in front of mailboxes. Those aren't fire lanes. It's people's way of saying, hey, don't park in front of the mailboxes. So I just encourage you when we talk about that, maybe they look at painting yellow on the corners. Fire hydrants, for example, the state code doesn't require that you stripe by them. The downside when you stripe by them is that the next person says, well, there's no striping by it, so I thought it was okay. So I just share that with you because of so much of the misuse that I see. Unfortunately, this is it's the shotgun when you should use a rifle. That's kind of where it's at. And obviously, we're kind of at our wits' end. I'm glad we're here in front of you. I'm glad that you have the opportunity to hear some of the challenges that we face. And the great thing about this is there's information here shared tonight that I hadn't thought of. But I can tell you it's very frustrating. If I showed you some of the pictures, you're like, no, that can't be that way. And again, last Friday I was down there and took pictures of that area, and you just shake your head and you go, who would do this? So we look forward to you being part of the solution, and we're here to make sure that you guys are aware, especially for me, that these guys have been busting their tails trying to find and not be here. But the reason we're here is because we're just striking out. So we're here for your help. Thank you.
Doug, as you're talking, I was thinking of something with the fire hydrants, and I got to tell you, I mean, parking in front of fire hydrants down there wasn't a huge priority just because of the volume of the cars and things like that, although important. I would just, as a thought, maybe as you're considering doing the angled parking there, that maybe you create the spaces to leave an opening, albeit maybe small. I'm not 15 foot on either side type of thing like that might be a little excessive, but but that might be another way of a mitigation factor to get as many cars as you can, but at the same time too, creating a safety lane for your hydrants and access to it. Because I bet you if I go down there right now that your car's parked in front of it, and it's just not enforced because the over volume and the problem down there. So.
When I was down there on Friday, a lot of corners, as you can see up here, there's even a car on the corner in this picture. That happens all over down there. So the sight view from that area was not good at all. And I really am going to encourage, from my perspective, I really think if you try to clear the streets at night, I really think that's going to, again, let these folks find the solution. They're the smart ones. They're the business owners. They're out there busting their tail. They'll figure it out. Just sometimes they need some nudging to get there. So that's why we're here looking for your guys' help. Thank you.
Well, we've been here on this topic quite a while. I'll give, Jared, I'll give you the last bit of closing before we receive and file.
No, thank you. And also thank you to the businesses for coming out tonight. Really appreciate that. Next steps will be continued dialogue with our businesses, implementing striping and signage, trying to shake from the tree, opportunities. Took a lot of great notes from tonight. Really appreciate you guys giving me that feedback that I really need, but really proud to work with the team. When Doug has to come and speak, that tells me that there's a public safety issue that we've identified and we need to be really careful. This region will continue to grow. The state's forcing us with new housing numbers in the near term. So we got to be careful here as we grow. We can do this, but this is sometimes what cities deal with. When you have growth, you got new problems, right? More street sweeping, more signage, more striping. So within all of that, thank you so much for your direction. Really appreciate your time this evening.
Jared, can you report back maybe 3 to 6 months from now on this?
Let me come back in 6 months. Let me do a touchdown ladder this summer. There's a number of folks I need to meet with, and also there's some funding. I got to find money for the striping and the signage. None of that's cheap. So there's a process there. But yeah, I'll be happy to come back and do a touchdown with y'all.
We appreciate it. Great job with Jarrett, with you and the rest of the staff, and Doug for representing the fire department and kind of giving us a perspective of things. So we really appreciate the background and all the work that went behind it, and your willingness to work with our business community, because we want them here, we want to retain them, and we want to work, do what we can to solve the issue and keep our businesses happy. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is a receive and file, so there's no action taken by the commission here. So I'll move on to the next item, which is city planner comments. Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple things to mention. We had our first community workshop on the general plan cleanup on Monday night here in the room. Thought that went well. Had some good feedback on the draft project. Anticipate coming to the commission probably in a few months with the first workshop with the commission to go over what's in the cleanup. A lot of work's going into that over the past year, so looking forward to bringing that to you. A couple items coming up on the horizon here in the next few meetings. We anticipate having the Parks and Trails master plans before you for the commission's recommendation. Your recommendation there is limited to general plan conformance, so keep that in mind. There is a Parks Commission in the city. Their job is to really get into the nitty-gritty, so your job is how does it comply with the general plan and the development code. Similarly, one of, I think, Commissioner LaPagula's favorites every year, the CIP will also be coming to the commission. And that's similar. It's general plan conformance. How does it comply? Typically, most of it's road work. So how does it comply with the circulation element? But that's also coming here probably in a couple meetings. So with that, turn it back over to you, Chair. Thanks.
Mr. City Attorney.
Nothing to add for tonight. Thank you.
Planning Commission comments. Anybody have anything they'd like to add that we haven't discussed? Any announcements or anything? I would just say it's nice to have all 5 of us up here for the first time this year. So I appreciate it to our new members and our new vice chair. So we truly are a team. We work as a team, and so for the betterment of the city. Really appreciate it. So with no further business, I'd like consensus for adjournment. I get the thumbs up, so we will go ahead and adjourn. It is 8:17.